Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. Beautiful spring day here on the Sunshine Coast. Spring's really kicking in now. So recently there was a lot of conjecture about certain dates related with the awakening or doom or all the multitude of topics that across the spectrum people are really focusing on at the moment. And I'll give you an overview of my perspective why focusing on dates is not helpful. And often these prophets are basically just a manifestation of the false light. And these new age pseudo-spirituality, false prophets, false light, fake predictions, even plants making predictions, all these sorts of things are all part of the distraction of the awakening and what the awakening really is at the core about. So from my view, it's very ineffective and unproductive to focus on specific dates for the awakening. And this is because time and time again, these dates have proven to be wrong. And I don't know how many dates have to come and go before people realise that a lot of the people that are making these predictions, they don't have the ability of clairvoyance. They're not even having intuitive capabilities, and a lot of it is just noise, and it is basically a distraction from doing the real inner work that's necessary to make this quantum leap in evolution, and also to stay in a state of being centered. And a lot of these predictions are really just focusing on hopium. They're just basically a loosh harvest where all these emotions are created of excitement, of anticipation, and it's just harvested, and then despair, despondency, anger, which again is just harvested, and it's just a collective turmoil swirling around. So if you want to be contributing to this global paradigm shift, then the best thing you can do at some levels, this is not entirely true for every aspect of it, is to remain centered and balanced and in a state of harmony, because that vibration is where the direction of this quantum leap in evolution is heading to. Now, that doesn't mean you should ignore or bury your head in the sand of these ongoing geopolitical events, which are now intensifying and actually will be impossible to avoid for people who have very successfully buried their heads in the sand up until now. And particularly if you're in Europe this winter, there is going to be an explosion of awakening and social, economic, political turmoil with the energy crisis there that's unfolding. But the point I didn't make that I wanted to in my recent update for the equinox, for the spring equinox here in Australia, is that everything is going to plan in the time schedule of how I see things playing out. Now, by that, I'm not saying trust the plan in any way or to just sit back and be inert and wait for things to happen. Far from it. But I'm saying this in the context from this colossal shift that is basically the end of a 26,000 year cycle. So anyone who's expecting that this is going to change in just one day or 1 week, 1 month, 1 season, this is going to be played out across a number of years. And this even goes into what I believe some of this false light regarding topics such as the solar flash, this kind of new age, Fantasia type spirituality, Instagram spirituality, that some cosmic event will just simply take people from a state of total hatred and fear and anger and transport them into a state of bliss, ecstasy, cosmic consciousness in the matter of minutes or hours. Who knows what they're actually really saying? I don't pay much attention to it. But I do know that this concept is put out there. And I think that's personally completely ridiculous, because evolution is an ongoing process that for 99% of the time is quite slow. Some people have some spontaneous bursts of realization. They have this true awakening in themselves from one meditation, from Kundalini rising, from an activation of Sahasrara, the crown. But for most of the time, you know, the process is quite slow. And people who have been on the spiritual journey for, you know, decades will tell you, even after those peak experiences, that the work is ongoing. And so that's why most people who have had these really big peak experiences will tell you the first thing that happens after it is like actually a lowering of consciousness, because it's impossible to sustain that extremely high vibrational state. And I'm not talking about being happy or being content. I'm talking about having some really profound revelations, which most people who've been doing serious meditation for over 10 years, who are really committed to the spiritual path, have had it one way or another at some point. But that doesn't mean that everything's ended for them. Far from it, actually. Many of these states of illumination actually can give you the reflection or the insight of how far there really is to go, and to actually bring your shadow out of these blind spots into the forefront, which is the ongoing work. And so this magic pill in this new age spiritual phenomenon it's extremely unhelpful. It's a extremely excellent example of spiritual bypassing, and it doesn't really contain with it any real seeds of genuine transformation. So this is part of the hype and the hysteria around these dates. And I actually go into this in my book here, Paradigm Shift, the Global Awakening of Humanity 2020 to 2040 by myself, and detailing that this is the end of a 26,000 year cycle, and I work predominantly in terms of the Hindu cycles of time, what's known as the Yugas. But however, I have been interested in prophecy actually going all the way back to when I was a child. So I've been studying prophecy and been researching prophecy for a long time, for decades and decades. But some of the prophecies, which I won't go too much into in this video, they are sort of individually based, like the insights or revelations from individuals. Whereas if we look at the Yugas, it's more of what I would look at as being a metaphysical understanding of how the cycles of time of the universe work. So if we're at the end of a 26,000 year cycle and we're moving from one age to another, then this is not going to happen in 1 week or 1 month. And particularly when we think about the spiritual dimension, is that the nadis, the energetic body, the actual structure of our non-physical body, it needs time to integrate into these higher states of consciousness. And that's the same for awakening Kundalini Shakti, from all these other paths that are basically energy based, which the tantric path is obviously the obvious one there, the tantric path, which is energy based. It's the same as if you plug a 1,000,000 watt appliance into a 240 volt power point, it would just blow up. And so that means that it's a good thing actually, because it gives us time to integrate and embody these higher frequencies that are coming onto the planet, and then start to manifest this. And this is the real key, because until we're taking responsibility for our own life and for what we are putting out there into the collective, then there can be no real genuine change. It's just basically we're going to be going around in circles. And so these cycles of time, because they're so vast, as I describe it, they're like two tectonic plates, one moving over the top of the other. And these tectonic plates are moving slowly, and is pressure. And the pressure is what's causing all this chaos, because if the new paradigm is the plate on top and the old paradigm is the one down the bottom, then we can see that there is this tension as one plate supersedes the other, or as one cycle supersedes the other. And at the most basic of examples, if we look at the rising of the sun, it doesn't go from darkness to light in one moment or in 1 minute. It is a transition. And this word transition is important, because the transition is that. And we're in that transition now. And this is the contention for my book, that this 20-year window 2020 to 2040 is the key 2 decades of this transition. This will go on after 2040, but we are really now in the real key moments of this paradigm breaking down. And the reality is that these global agendas that are pushing so much crisis on the world, that are all manufactured, by the way, are actually helping accelerate the birthing of the new paradigm. So as difficult as it is, because this chaos is affecting us personally in our own personal lives, at a collective level, it is actually good that it is fast. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Do you rip it off it slowly or quickly? And at the moment, it feels like the Band-Aid is going to be ripped off pretty quickly. Pretty much this game, as I see it, will be playing out this decade as far as the breaking down of the old paradigm. The infrastructure, the systemic collapse, everything around that will mean that that a vacuum will be created. And in fact, as I've mentioned previously, I do think that the vacuum itself will be probably the most difficult, because the systems perhaps are behind us and will be in that intermediary zone before the new is coming, the more with genuine humanitarian philanthropic systems that are looking after collective. And I don't mean this in a excuse me, there goes my book. I don't mean that in a Marxist way at all, but in a way that we have this Aquarian humanitarianism, which is really just around the corner now, with the first transit of Pluto going into Aquarius next year, even though it will retrograde back into Capricorn. So this is really this transition, and it will be problematic. There's no escaping the difficulties. I think it's important that we don't get caught up in the doom porn and the doom too much, but at the same time, as so many people are really happy to do, is to bury their head in the sand and avoid any form of reality in terms of what is here and what is going to transpire, particularly in the next 6 to 18 months, and what's happening in the financial systems around the world. The data pouring out of the financial systems, if you're not aware, without going into specific metrics, it is so overwhelming. I mean, I definitely have never seen anything like this in my life. It's going to make the GFC look like a very mild recession, and particularly what is happening in America. It is incredible. I read a statistic today, or heard a statistic today, that 6 out of 10 people in America don't have the money to pay a $500 bill, which is, it's an expression of this term, very unfortunate and sad, of the working poor, that people are literally having 2, sometimes 3 jobs, and they don't have enough money to pay an unexpected bill. It is going to be tough, but unfortunately, this is actually a very big opportunity for huge growth for the collective in many different ways. And these financial systems are at the core of some of the slave systems going back on this planet. And they need to fail, and they need to be seen to fail, because as we've seen with the pandemic, it's really very difficult for some people to realise that their belief systems are based on a false reality, are based on propaganda, are not based on reality. And unfortunately, because that has been so extreme with the events of the pandemic, which we've all seen, that this financial system is going to go much deeper, I feel, into giving people a jolt into reality, and just to see how much money is collected in taxes and how much money is wasted by people who have never run a business in their life, never been held accountable financially in any job they've actually had. So many of these politicians and bureaucrats, they're just career public servants who have just basically fed and dined on the taxpayer their whole life, and they have no idea of the real accountability running a business actually has, or being an entrepreneur, or simply struggling to make ends meet. And because of the amount of money that's been completely wasted, it is so colossal that I read one report, and you can check this for yourself and see that, for example, this 2032 Olympics in Brisbane, Australia, that, by the way, overwhelmingly, it appears that there is very, very little public support for it. But the Gabba, the big sports ground in Brisbane, they were going to close, I think, for at least a year, maybe longer. Could have been 2 years, I'm not sure exactly. And it was going to cost $1 billion for the renovations, and that a number of seats were going to be added to the Gabba was something like 7,000, like something around that number, if I remember correctly. And to think that we have this colossal housing crisis here in Australia and obviously in Queensland, colossal renting crisis, and all the other allocation of resources which people would prefer to go into schools, roads, hospitals, public infrastructure, and that $1 billion by these people who are completely so out of touch with reality that they would spend it on adding that many seats for a sporting event. I mean, it is remarkable. And the level of dysfunction it needs to amplify in order to shake people from their coma. Now, this is not something that I want, and I don't actually think this is something that is actually strictly necessary at a cosmic level. But given the level of inertia, of indoctrination, of people who are just simply lacking any form of critical thinking, that is what is necessary to happen, indicates to me that things are on track. And this is why my premise is that this awakening is across decades. And 2020 was really when the match was lit. And okay, in my book I'm also talking about before that and giving context in some of the earlier cycles of time and other events and so on. But predominantly, obviously, this is what I'm referring to, is that this period, 2020 to 2040, is the window, and the window is not defined by one day, 1 week, 1 month, even one event. There will be major events. The writing really is on the wall that it is now unavoidable, but to focus on dates, it is counterproductive to really stepping into this space of co-creating the new paradigm, which we're all here to do. So if you haven't signed up for my YouTube video channel, please, I'll put a link. Have a look at it, check it out, see if that's something for you. And thanks for watching. Plenty more to talk about, and we live in epic times.